As I watched all this unfold, I thought, well, this isn't how I pictured Jesus. Being a Christian, I assumed. If I'm dead, I should go straight to heaven, and Jesus Christ will be there. But that's not exactly what I saw. In 1982, I was working as a physical therapist at a hospital and medical center in Anchorage, Alaska. I injured my back on the job, and the treatment I received didn't help. I was going to need surgery. Since I had already undergone back surgery before, they weren't sure if they could just perform a laminectomy or if a spinal fusion would be necessary. I was very worried that a spinal fusion might end my career as a physical therapist. I reached out to some people back in New York, where I'm from, and to the church I attended, asking them to pray that the surgery would only be a laminectomy so I could keep working. On the day of the surgery, my husband and children came with me to the hospital. Since my surgery was one of the first of the morning, they were able to accompany me to the operating room. After that, they were moved to the waiting room. They prepared me for surgery. I was placed face down on the table since they were going to reopen the incision from my previous back surgery. They administered anesthesia, and that's the last thing I remember until suddenly I felt a force pulling me toward the ceiling, going through the upper floor and rising higher and higher until I literally passed through the roof of the hospital. I kept ascending until I was drawn into a dark tunnel, and the speed at which I moved increased dramatically compared to before. In the distance, I saw a small point of light that grew larger as I approached it, until I finally passed through the light and emerged into a completely different, very bright, drear environment. Being a Christian, I had thought, if I'm dead, I should go straight to heaven, and Jesus Christ will be there. But that's not exactly what I saw. I looked down to see if I was standing on the ground or what was happening. I realized I couldn't see my feet or my legs. I felt like my body was still my body, but obviously not, because I couldn't see my feet or legs. When I looked to my left, there was a man, and I moved closer, trying to figure out who he was. I noticed he had dark, almost black hair tied back, and he wore a simple white tunic with a sash tied around his waist. The tunic reached just below mid-thigh. Below his knees, he had leather straps crisscrossing up to his calves, leading down to leather sandals. As I took all this in, I thought, well, this isn't how I pictured Jesus. I knew he wasn't Jesus. I didn't know exactly who he was, but I was sure of that. I don't know why, but I felt compelled to follow him, so I did. I stayed right behind him, and suddenly the landscape shifted completely. I began to see a lush green field filled with beautiful flowers and trees with thick leaves. In the distance, everything was absolutely stunning. Then I realized that everything I saw, from the grass to the flowers, the trees and the leaves, was glowing from within, radiating its own light. The colors were indescribable, bright, vivid, iridescent, alive. Many of them I had never seen before. I was truly captivated by it all, and my guide, as I started calling him, kept walking and again told me to follow him. As he said this, I was immediately behind him, and at that moment, he stood at the edge of a river. The river sparkled, emitting light, just like everything else. Everything seemed so alive. On the other side of the river stood my father, who had passed away when I was 7, and my brother, who had died in a car accident, along with my uncles I knew who had already passed. It felt like a big family reunion, and they were very happy to see me there. I longed to join them. I wanted to be with them, but my guide said, "No, first we need to go to another place," so I had to follow my guide, and he continued along the riverbank. In the center of the clearing was a large doorway, and the doors swung open. We entered together. It was a much smaller room, with a table on one side, almost like a conference table. Many other beings were seated around it, as if waiting for us to arrive. When we entered, I felt as if all those beings knew who I was and were happy to see me, as if I should already know them. I don't know why I felt that way, but they seemed very familiar to me. That was when my guide said to me, "Let's review your life." When he said that, at that moment, I saw my entire life, from the moment I was born up to that point when I was 32 years old. I didn't just see it. I relived all the different encounters and events that had happened throughout my life. Additionally, I could feel what the other people I was interacting with or talking to were feeling. At the same time, I was able to sense what they felt while I was experiencing my own emotions. It was truly astonishing to see how some small things like an act of kindness had such a positive impact on other people, to the point that they also performed good deeds, creating an enormous domino effect of positive influences. It made me realize the real impact our thoughts, behaviors, and actions have on others. It was a very positive and enlightening learning experience. Then, I was told that I could choose to stay there or return to my life. But if I decided to come back, they wanted me to see a few things. They said they would show me what was happening in the hospital waiting room at that moment. I could see where my husband, my daughter, and my son were, along with the doctor who had operated on me, standing by the door, still in his surgical uniform, talking to my husband. The kids were at the back of the room, near a small couch. Then my guide said, "I want you to see the prayers of the people you asked to pray for you." My guide also showed me that my daughter was praying, thinking that I had died, since the doctor was there, and a lot of time had passed. She prayed for me to live. She didn't want me to die. Her prayer, along with those of others, suddenly made me feel all my emotions again. And I thought, oh my God, I can't let my daughter and son grow up without a mother, just as I grew up without a father. I can't stay here, no matter how much this place is filled with love, peace, and beauty. I need to return to my life. So I told my guide that I wanted to come back, and he replied, "Okay, you'll receive proof that this truly happened, but you won't remember everything we showed you about the future. You won't be able to recall every detail, but enough to know, without a doubt, that this was real." Immediately after saying that, I don't remember anything about the journey back or any of that. I only remember waking up in the recovery room. My children were on one side of the bed, and my husband on the other. I spent 12 days in the hospital, and throughout that time, I continued to feel that peace and love that permeated everything. I had never felt anything like that before. For me, this was real proof that this experience was true. And that is my story.